It's Ladies Talking Love, Episode 6, Pelvic Wisdom from Sex to Childbirth. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. I'm excited to welcome Dr. Emily Wilson onto Ladies Talking Love today. She's a pelvic floor therapist and a birth healing specialist. She's passionate about helping women reconnect with their bodies and heal. After 5 years of practicing in Wyoming, she felt called to move back east and practice what she was preaching to her patients. That's where her new practice, Pelvic Wisdom Physical Therapy, was created in Portland, Maine. When not working, she loves to be exploring the outdoors or snuggling indoors with her cat. Hey, ladies, I could really use your help for some upcoming roundtable episodes. You can volunteer to participate as a small group of 2 to 4 friends or individually, and we'll create a group. Topics for our future roundtable episodes are wide open, but here's some ideas that I've been thinking about. Periods to birth control, sex advice you've received, the good and the bad, to religious, familial, or cultural norms that affected your view of sexuality. And of course, feel free to suggest your own topic when you volunteer. You can reach out to me on Instagram at ladies.talkinglove or email hello@ladiestalkinglove.com. I'm super excited to meet you and talk love. Thanks so much for joining me today, Emily.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
This is a topic that I am so passionate about because after I had my second baby, I didn't even know about pelvic floor therapy or anything like that. And I just happened upon it. My nurse midwife suggested I go, and I came out of there just floored. Like, it changed my life. I knew things about my body I didn't know before. I knew how to do Kegels correctly for like the first time in my life. So I just wanted you to take a little bit of time. How did you get interested in women's health and become a pelvic floor therapist?
Yeah, I think my intuition was guiding me before I even knew I had a strong sense of intuition, right? Like, now my practice is being built on how intuitive I am, but I went to school and did not think pelvic floor is for me. Like, that's kind of taboo. It's an area we don't talk about in America. So I was right along with that. But my first boss, she took me aside. She's like, what do you think about pelvic floor? Like, Cheyenne, Wyoming really needs someone to do this work. And I was like, I'll go to the class. And I happened to be having pain that day or like that week beforehand. And I was like 23, 24. Like, I should not be having pain. I had no kids, no issues. And it was like in my low back radiating into my butt cheek. And I was like, I can't figure this out. And I'm a PT, like something's going on. And we went to the class, and like the last day, she was like, if you have pain in this area that radiates like from the little like dimple in our back to our butt cheek, it's pelvic floor. And we like split into groups because we all do like, we learn how to do the work on each other. And I was like, you got to go find that spot because I think that's it. And she did. She touched it. She reproduced the pain and it melted within seconds with just a gentle release. And I was like, oh my gosh, it wasn't my SI joint. It wasn't my pelvis. It wasn't my back. It was just the muscles. I was like, this is a whole new realm that we need to like dive into because people need this work. Like you said, it's so important and it's so life-changing on so many levels. So it just started escalating from there where I felt inclined to open my own practice.
And who would know like that your pelvic floor is part of that area on your back into like your glute, who would know? And how, so can you, I know we can't see you, but can you describe a little bit to us, like what does the pelvic floor include? What areas of the body?
Yeah. So it's like this whole hammock of muscles between your tailbone and your pubic bone, but also going like hip to hip. So as you Kegel, that muscle comes up, or the muscles, it's made of many, many muscles. And then as you relax, it comes back down. So it's holding us up our whole life, holding up our organs, helping our posture. It's moving with every breath. So it's just located at the base of the pelvis, essentially. And it's so important for so many functions in our day-to-day life.
And if we don't know how to take care of it, and I kind of mentioned like Kegels, I had no idea how to do them correctly. You know, I always thought it was just like squeezing to stop my pee. And when I went to a pelvic floor specialist, she's like, no, like it engages your whole core, like everything. What are some of the side effects that can happen if we aren't taking care of our pelvic floor?
Yeah. So let me break it up into like 3 different categories that I see my patients, because I think that will give people a really good idea of how PT can help all different people and then what we do in therapy.
That
So the
sounds great.
first category is just pure weakness. These are the people that typically they're my elderly women, my men post prostate, sometimes postpartum. These people, they leak when they cough, sneeze, laugh. The pelvic floor, they're like doors that open and close to let urine in or out. And so they cough, sneeze, laugh, the urine trickles out, they're leaking. These people really don't have any pain. So that's the first category. A lot of people think they're in that category because a lot of us leak, but most of us aren't. So maybe really 3 to 5% of my patients actually fall in that realm. The second category is the muscles are too tight. So the doors are like stuck closed. So these people have a hard time relaxing to let the urine come out. So we're dealing with maybe frequent UTIs, urine retention. Sometimes the urine's, I call it stop and go pee or red light, green light, like a little trickles, then I move and I stand up and a little more trickles. It's just a really difficult time relaxing. It could be for urine and for bowels. And these people typically have pain. So they're having pain with intercourse. They're having pelvic pain even without intercourse. It's just that lower abdominal pain throughout the day. Or urine retention was the big one, like I said. So they can't relax. They're stuck, clenched in a Kegel in that upright position, and they have to learn how to let those muscles come down.
Mm.
And then the third category is the muscles are tight, but the doors won't close. So I almost think of it like theater curtains, the last strings of the theater curtains won't come down. So you're not getting a good closure. So there's a gap in the doors. So a leaky seal is what I say. And every time we cough, sneeze, laugh, the urine comes out or bowel matter. And it's just hard to control that. But they can still be having the pain. They can still be having pain with intercourse, pelvic pain, hip pain, abdominal pain, groin pain, those kind of things. So the muscles are tight, but not closing well. Does that kind of give you a better perspective of like
great.
all 3? And so
Yeah.
if you're category 2 and 3, I don't recommend Kegels like for maybe ever or for at least a long time in our work together. That first category can get Kegels. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception about how pelvic PT works, or it's just Kegels. And there's so much more than that, especially if the muscles need to be relaxed versus tightened.
And what are some of the things that you can do to help with that relaxation of the muscles for those groups 2 and 3?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of diaphragmatic breathing, learning just what it feels like to be tense or to be relaxed. We call it like a reverse Kegel or down training a lot of times. I use a lot of meditation in my practice to help women with this. But then I think the biggest thing is looking at what tension in the body is contributing to the tension there. So if your abs are tight, if your glutes, if your adductors, it's like the inner leg muscle, any muscles really surrounding that hammock is going to pull the hammock tight. So a lot of my work is let's release in your belly. Let's stop holding that belly so tight. And then the pelvic floor can finally like let go and come back to its resting tone instead of being really tight and more like a trampoline.
And what do you see in your patients when they're finally kind of able to relax their pelvic floor?
Yeah, the symptoms go away, right? Like whatever. And I see just a plethora of symptoms. There's nothing that anyone comes to me about. I'm like, that's really strange. It's all like, it's just how it presents to you. So maybe we have the same pelvic tension, and we just like, I leak and you don't,
Yeah.
or you have pain and I don't, right? It's just no matter across the board, you're functioning better. And it even brings like a sense of vitality, I feel like, to women to know and to access these muscles. There's a lot of good energy there we have.
So what are some like symptoms that you would suggest coming in to get checked by a pelvic floor specialist? And especially thinking of women after childbirth, I feel like in our culture, there's this culture that's been created like, well, after you have a baby, sorry, like you're never the same. You're going to pee your pants. You're going to like, if you do jumping, there's just this culture of like, sorry, deal with it. What type? And obviously, like, there's a balance to that where our bodies are constantly changing, and we need to have self-care and love that to know we're constantly changing. But what things are kind of non-negotiable? Like, this shouldn't be the way it is, and you can get help.
Right. So it's those things are common, especially leakage is probably like the number one common thing, but it's not normal and it's not like necessarily how it should be. But you're right. Like the conception just is that's how it is. You had a baby. Like
Mm-hmm.
how many checkups do we have when we're pregnant? And then we have one postpartum.
Yeah.
And that's it. And they like sometimes they don't even do internals. I'm like, did the doctor look down there? No. And I'm like, what do you mean? Your pelvic floor just went through
You just gave birth.
right. You went through this crazy event. You did the work, be it C-section or vaginal birth. And there's so much the muscles need to kind of relearn and kind of come back to. So it is not normal to have pain. It is not normal to be leaking. These are all things we can work on. And then if intercourse hurts, if like stitches aren't healing well, or if the whole muscle is guarding, the pelvic floor is kind of up and tight because of pain, right? That typically takes some pelvic PT to kind of unwind and get back to feeling like you can participate in intimacy the way you want.
What I got sent to for the PT was I was having some spasms in my abs, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even realize that was like connected to, my pelvic floor. But I know a lot of women also have like diastasis recti after having a baby. What are some things that pelvic floor can help with that?
Yeah, so pretty easy to test. You can look it online. You pretty much just put two fingers on like the crease between your belly button and your pubic bone, or above the belly button to your ribs, and you lift your head when you're laying on your back. And if there feels like a divot or a gap, or you can see something bulging up, we start thinking, okay, there's a diastasis here. You're probably not nice and kind of together on the abdomen. So instead, we're misplacing pressure, which could be contributing to leakage or tension, things like that. So, I mean, you look at the pregnancy posture, it's so much lordosis, that's deep arch in the back, all the weight's forward because you're growing and holding a baby in your belly. So that stretches out the front tissues, and all the tissues kind of collect and tighten in the back. So we have to kind of position. And I've taken training on birth healing where we kind of pull the tissues back, encourage the muscles to tighten, and then they learn how to control that pressure so that when they lift their head, there's no gapping or there's no bulging, that there's just a strength there. The muscles now are
Back together.
yes.
With birth healing, I love that that's something you specialize in. When would you suggest, should all women come in after having a baby? Should all women come in general? What are some of your thoughts on who should get checked? Obviously, if you have some of these issues, but are there other things you would suggest?
I would say every woman that comes through my door, there's like this light bulb moment, like you said for yourself, where it's like, who didn't tell me about this? And then everyone's part of the tribe now, which I love. They're like, I'm going to tell everyone. And it spreads like kind of rapid fire through the town, which is so exciting to see women helping women. So I think anyone could benefit, but especially if you're having pain, I wish and I hope all of us pelvic PTs are working hard to make this more of a common practice postpartum, teaming up with midwives and doulas, and then eventually hoping to get into like gyno OBs to kind of make it more known that we're here and we can help. But other countries, it is standard in France and lovely countries like that. We hope to get there one day.
Yes. Oh, I hope so too. And kind of one thing that I've loved about your platform, you focus a lot on self-love and acceptance. And so we talked about some of the issues that can come up. But over our lifetime, our bodies change. But in our culture, it's kind of like, you know, whatever you were at, I don't know, 14 or 15 is supposedly like your prime of what you should look like. How can you kind of accept these changes in your body as they come, but also be aware of when you need to get help? We kind of talked about that, but like, how can you just have the self-love and care and accept
Yeah.
your body as it changes?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've been kind of discovering with my words and my work is like there's so many misconceptions about and limiting beliefs too about what it is to be feminine in this culture, what we've been taught and what's been instilled in us. And so I like to, let's reform those limiting beliefs. Let's reform the misconceptions, like the bounce back culture. You are not supposed to be like running a half marathon at 6 weeks. That is ridiculous.
So 6 weeks postpartum. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so what we see on social media is not reality. And that's like the
Mhm.
advice we're taking. So then we either feel guilt that we're not where our friends are at, or we feel guilt that, we're not kind of back to our postpartum body. So just the misconception of this is what you can do postpartum, and just learning that like step by step, gradually training for like a marathon is kind of like the same thing. It takes months to get back. Your uterus stretched to 500% its size during pregnancy, and it grew from a couple ounces of an organ to 2 pounds. So that much expansion is going to take months to come back. And so we have to just be gentle with ourselves. And I think the misconception of bouncing back and then needing rest, like let's allow women, I'm giving everyone permission listening to this, like to rest. You're allowed to kind of go within. You grew a baby, right? You like 3D printed a baby in your uterus. It is your most creative organ. There is nothing more creative than that. And now you get to like enjoy the baby. That's like every need relies on you, and you're not sleeping, but you get to just rest for a little bit. And maybe we can normalize that. I hope in the future we can normalize
Yeah. And of course, all of us who've had babies are like, rest. What do you mean? Like they're up all the time. What are some ways you suggest, even though sleep might not be
that.
as much as we would like, what are some other ways that are helpful for women to find that rest and to kind of be in tune with themselves and heal?
I like to have my women get back to a place of gratitude. So just that amazing awe of my uterus did this work. It had that capability. I birthed the baby. Any way you birth the baby, you birth the baby. So starting from a place of gratitude, and then just allowing ourselves to ask for help when we need it, be it from our partner, our neighbors, our friends, our family, so that you can take some time for yourself and get out of the house, or you can go down for a bit of a nap. But just living in a little more gratitude is going to help shift you from my stomach is not what it used to look like, or I can't do the workout I want to do, and just kind of introduce a little bit more of a gentle perspective for you while you're healing.
And how can we transfer that from even our lives to like our sex lives with our partners? Because especially in our culture as women, and after having a baby, it can be really hard when it's like, I don't feel good in my body. And I think that self-love is a super great place to start. But what are some stories or experiences you've had with clients being able to help with the PT to help heal their organs, but also accepting their body to be more intimate after having birth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, starting to work on it yourself, but then with your partner, being open where you're at, like 6 weeks, maybe you're not ready to jump back into bed. And that's totally okay. Like I have a lot of women who want to wait for longer, or their sex drive is just a little bit lower because their body is breastfeeding a baby.
Mhm.
That doesn't need to be your norm if it's not comfortable and not what you want to be doing in the moment. So like let's take that misconception off the table. And then beyond that, I think you just start slow with yourself, be it self-love and self-pleasure, and then work up to intimacy with your partner, or just being really, I think being open and really allowing them to show up for you, and support you the way you need to be supported and what you
Yeah.
want to be doing, not just because you
Yeah.
feel bad you haven't had intercourse in weeks.
I know from my own experience, it has been really healing to after birth, after my body's different. Like my husband and I have almost laughed together, like as we touch my belly, and it's like, oh, this is new and different. But it was, instead of me being really embarrassed about it, it was actually a bonding moment of like, we both went through this and he is okay that my body has changed and he's grateful for me bringing a baby into the world, and we can just kind of bond over the changes and be where we're at, like whether that, like, and some people listening, like maybe they're not as comfortable religiously or just personally with like self pleasuring, but just to find ways to connect outside of intercourse, even just cuddling without your clothes on, or just whatever you feel comfortable with, or with your clothes on, just like finding ways to connect intimately, but it doesn't have to be intercourse. Do you have any other thoughts or perspectives on that you tell your patients with that, kind of taking things slow? And
Well, I love the way you did it. I think that's awesome. I like to incorporate with my patients, like if their partner is willing to participate, doing some scar release of the C-section or doing some like you had abdominal spasms. So I'd probably have had your husband help you release some of the abdominal tissue on, your off days of treatment, so that he was being an active participant, trying to get you back to where you felt most comfortable. And then you could see that he was caring and participating. So usually bringing the partner a little bit into your therapy session at home is really kind of a great tool for that as well.
oh, I think that's beautiful. Just bringing them in where you're at and connecting. Cause I think sometimes we separate it. We're like, okay, this was my thing. This was you. But I've definitely found, as I've brought my partner into my experiences of birth. Of course, he didn't give birth. So, but like he can still be a big part of it and a big part of my healing as he participates. I think that's beautiful. As we start to close up, just what are some other issues surrounding sexuality that you see come into your practice, and what are some ways that PT can help solve those?
I think an interesting part of my work is looking at the tension that we're holding in our pelvis, like certain quadrants of the the front is more like fear based. It's we're holding emotions of fear there. The back of the pelvic bowl would be like your support system. Left is always the feminine and right is the masculine. So I can go in and touch internally if a patient's okay with that, and start to ask, okay, what's coming up for you? What do you feel here? And maybe it is like a limiting belief around sexuality. Maybe it is they don't feel comfortable in their body. Maybe, I think the biggest thing though that I see is women are like, okay, well, sex was taught to me that it was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't allowed to talk about it, to think about it. If I had sex, I was going to get pregnant. And then, okay, I'll get married. And then you're just expected to like, okay, you should know everything you should know in the bedroom, and guilt free, go for it.
Doesn't work.
And most women are at a total, just they hit the wall. Right.
Yeah.
And so that turns into tension because they're not comfortable with what they've been taught. So they're either thinking they're not the good girl, or that they're breaking religion, or everything that they've been taught is conflicting. And so that ends up guarding in the pelvic floor. So maybe I go in there, I'm like, okay, what's coming up for you? And they're like, I just feel guilt around having sex, or I feel grief around my
Mm.
sexuality. And we can release that and kind of reform a new belief system for them. And that really, I see, heals that patient for much longer now that we're getting to like the emotional root of the issue that we hold in our pelvic floor.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
with those, are you able to involve the partner a lot of times in that as well? Or is that kind of, you work more with just the woman?
Usually when I'm doing the release and in the appointments, it's more with just the woman, but they can bring that work home. And I love for them to have an open discussion like, hey, a lot of trauma that I didn't realize I was hiding in my pelvis came up today, or here's my feelings about sexuality and religion. And I just am at this like point where I gotta kind of work through that with you. And then I think that opens the door for the relationship on how they want to heal it moving forward. But yeah, it usually starts with the woman in my office where
Hmm.
they kind of feel led and where I feel led to kind of take them that day, and then just discover what's the underlying thing. How can we shift this emotion or release this tension or shift the belief, like I said?
Oh, I think that is beautiful, just to kind of, and that's, I feel like the whole point of this podcast too, like, let's start with women, let's get these conversations open. And I hope that transfers into your relationships, because without open communication and letting our partner know, it's not going to go anywhere. But sometimes it's safer to start talking with other women and be like, oh, this is how it is. So kind of as we close up, I would just love if you could share a couple actionable tips for women who are starting this journey or on this journey of just kind of healing, reconnecting after giving birth, or even just the changes in their bodies, some of these issues that we talked about. What are some tips you would have for them?
I think just starting to examine, like, am I feeling this way because of what I've been taught in the past? Because I'm not comfortable with my femininity, because I think menopause, they tell me, is going to be painful and I'm going to shrivel up and die. Like, where's the belief coming from? And then how do we start reconstructing it? I think that's the first one. When we think about childbirth, I just hope women know that you can rest and that you can take your time getting back into things. And that's going to be healthiest for you and your pelvic floor and your energy. And then the other thing postpartum, I think, is so important and pivotal is when I see women, they come in and I have them relive their birth story that they had with their baby. So I have them write it down, and then I have them call their mom and write down their mom's birth story with them. So then we start looking for themes in the generations, and usually like the themes start carrying over, and then mom can start learning, okay, maybe this is kind of where this came from, and here's how I start healing this so that my child, when they eventually have a baby, no longer have this theme. And so when I see that healed and work on patients with that, of like releasing any trauma that they had in the birthing experience, it changes their whole relationship. We change the matriarch of the family, and it trickles down to everyone.
Wow.
And so I have a beautiful example I can share with you.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I was like, please share an example.
Yeah. So I had this mom. She had a 3-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy. And the 3-year-old girl, I called her the wild feminine. She was like unfiltered, just roaring with energy, this beautiful, bright, like vibrant female. Couldn't be tamed, right? At 3 years old. So beautiful. And the son was like super quiet and super cautious. And, you know, she's like, he won't jump off that jungle gym. He won't do this. He doesn't ever get mad at his sister. He's very cautious, very inward. And when I asked her about the birth stories, he had a very traumatic birth story, right? He was her first baby. He came out blue, and then he had amniotic bands around his fingers. So the surgeon, within 24 hours of the birth, wanted to do surgery to amputate, which wasn't necessary, and they ended up avoiding. Wow. But here she was with this belief that her son was always going to die, because that's what happened in the birth room. Yeah. So this was 6 years out, but she felt comfortable enough with me and safe to start replaying it and reprocessing it. And she sat up and she was like a whole different color. She was like, I didn't remember all of those things. And we also, in the meditation, we spent some time to connect to him in the womb space and give him energy, and just have her remember how it felt to have her baby kick in her belly, or how she felt when she first learned she conceived, and that love and that undeniable feeling of motherhood. And so we started shifting away from the trauma of birth into the gratitude and that love and that connection with him. And she just was like blushing and beautiful, like vibrant when she got up. I can't even like describe it. And she was so thankful. She left and she went home, and she watched her son for the next week. She didn't tell him anything. He's 6, right? But he started changing. She was mirroring her fear to him. And when she stopped thinking he was going to die, he became adventurous. She was like, Emily, he's a whole different kid. He's running around. He's like feisty and a little like he's not listening, but I love it. And so you could just see that it shifted her whole life, his whole life, how he shows up in the world. And it gave me goosebumps. That was a big day for us.
And I feel like that's one thing I took away from pelvic floor too, is that a lot of these things that I'm feeling, or that the stresses, I'm holding them in my body. And I think I hadn't thought about that too, but I'm also projecting them onto my children or my spouse or people around me. And so if I can kind of get to the core, then we can all be healthier. That is a beautiful example. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Oh, yes.
So how are some ways we can connect to our bodies and really learn to listen? This isn't something that's always super intuitive.
Right. The one thing I like to do, and I call them pelvic wisdoms, which I think is kind of funny, but I sit on my bed and I try to get quiet for a minute, like maybe the kids aren't up yet, or maybe they're already asleep, and I go deep into my body. And so I go deeper, 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 and I just keep saying it till I like get to like what I imagine my uterus. So I'm imagining this like sac like organ, this hollow organ behind my pubic bone. And then I just listen and I like ask her, what do you want to tell me? Because she's like this divine feminine within our own bodies, our own wisdom center. And usually I get some kind of whisper from her. And I try to get about 3 different whispers and then I write them all down. And she's told me to open my own clinic, to move cross country, to embody the feminine and start healing myself. Like it's just really cool. And so she just is like doing the happy dance down there now that I'm like not working for the man and living my intuitive lifestyle. And so I just think that's a really neat exercise, that, and then people can kind of go to a gratitude journal instead, if that feels more comfortable, or both, where they're just writing 3 things at the end of the day that they're grateful for, instead of running through all the negatives and what happened through the day that they weren't happy with. We just start shifting that and doing 3 gratitudes for a week. The study shows that it can last for 6 months, the benefit, the positive benefit.
Wow. That's amazing.
Like
and it helps you kind of get deeper into yourself, what you're feeling by writing those or by doing the other exercise.
Yeah. So those are fun little Emily tips.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Thanks for coming on today, Emily. I think we all learned a lot. And I'd love if you could just share briefly where people can find you, where they can follow you, or if they're in your area, how they could come to your practice.
Yes. So I just moved to Portland, Maine, and my practice is called Pelvic Wisdom. Most of the bread and butter, what I do is in the clinic, but I can also do online consultations or energy work, birth healing work, work around just how you're showing up in your body in your pelvic bowl. So that's always an option for people as well. Everything I have is under Pelvic Wisdom. No one thought of the name yet. So my website is pelvicwisdom.com. My Gmail is pelvicwisdom@gmail.com. And then my practice is Pelvic Wisdom, and my Instagram is pelvic with a _ and then wisdom. So all fun places to follow along and see what I'm up to if you're interested.
Yeah, I've loved following along with you. Thanks so much for coming on today, Emily.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here and being here on this journey with me. I hope that this interview gave you some helpful tips. Just to briefly recap, these are the tips that Emily talked about. First of all, to examine what your beliefs are surrounding sex or childbirth and how that could be affecting you and how you feel in your body. Next, she talked about the importance of taking time to rest after giving birth and to slowly work back into exercise. She talked about after giving birth, it could also be helpful to write down your birth story and compare it with your mom's story to start to find and then heal generational themes or trauma. Lastly, she talked about taking time to connect and listen to your body. You can do this through meditation, or she talked about the benefits of a gratitude journal. Thanks so much for being here with me and for talking love. Even though I hope to cover relevant and transformative topics, this podcast does not replace professional or medical advice. For personalized advice, please seek help from a licensed professional. Join the conversation at ladies.talkinglove on Instagram and tag your friends who would like to participate. You can also check out our website, ladiestalkinglove.com, where you can access each episode and join our exclusive newsletter. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Instagram or by email to hello@ladiestalkinglove.com as we learn together. Thanks for talking love.